job. How are y'all doing? Hanging in? Some head nods. We are making a big shift over here into some data world. I am celebrating that I have heat and hot water. We have been without gas since Friday. Almost went and got the camper just so I could have some amenities. I am really thankful for just the basic things. I hope some good things or some overcoming things are happening in your neck of the woods. Okay, so today we are joined by Danielle, who I've had the opportunity to work with on a number of different occasions, sessions, consulting, and of course, this good old cohort. She comes from student affairs. I know a lot of you, or has worked in student affairs before. I know a lot of you here. So she gets our kind of work. I don't know what that means, but she also is, if you get her going, she is quite hilarious, even though she's speaking about some pretty geeky stuff. So as a reminder, don't be intimidated about data and evaluation. She's got some goodies like an early Easter bunny to gift everyone in our own journeys of documenting data, reporting it out, and just making sense of the madness. So Danielle, I'm excited to turn it over to you.
Hello, everybody. I'm Danielle. I'm very happy to be here. I'm in York, Pennsylvania right now, which is historically Susquehannock land. I'd like to acknowledge that. And by day, I am the Director of Digital Marketing for York College of Pennsylvania. But like Josie said, my first job in higher ed was doing communications and marketing for our student affairs division. So I don't know, how many of you are in student affairs right now? Okay. Oh gosh, a lot. Okay. So yeah, I think that was always a good start and sort of lended itself to my philosophy that even now that I'm in central marketing and working on a lot of enrollment marketing and advancement marketing, in addition to like retention efforts and things, I do think it all sort of comes back to the student experience at the root. So I'm always grateful that I started in student affairs because I don't know if I would have gotten that if I started in another division. But like Josie said, we're going to talk about data today. I'm just going to get my screen share up. All right, so on the agenda, this all looks scary. I'll preface it. It's really not. Like, we're gonna be fine. We're gonna do it together. It's gonna be great. So we're gonna talk about choosing which metrics you're going to follow and what your key performance indicators are going to be, tracking those analytics, maintaining your own system and coming up with your own system to evaluate that data, using the data to actually make decisions about how to move forward and what kind of work you're doing in the future, and then communicating your findings. So I'm going to throw a lot at you pretty quickly. So apologies in advance, but I do really, really encourage you to go into Teachery after this. It's all there too, like in a lot of detail. We've got some extra resource links and things in the Teachery workbook. So definitely use that resource after this. And of course, stop me, ask questions. We'll have conversations as we go and see where everyone is and what you want to learn more about. And I'm very happy to talk about data ad nauseum, as Josie knows. So we'll start with the beginning. Which metrics matter? There are a lot of them. So I have some of the more common ones. There are like literally hundreds across several platforms, and you can get really granular with it on a lot of those platforms too. Some of the more common ones, I won't read you the definitions for all of these. but impressions and reach, I do like to call those out since they're really similar, but there's a slight difference there. In impressions is how many times somebody saw your post or your page, and reach is the number of users who saw it. So depending on how you're accessing data, it will usually always have impressions, and sometimes it also has reach. So just make sure you know what you're actually measuring there if you're looking at one of those. Other than that, followers, we all know, likes, reactions, comments, link, click, shares, engagement rate. Those are some of the most common ones that I see people measure. But there's a lot. And so it's a little bit tricky sometimes to figure out what you actually want to track and look at. You'll hear a lot of people talk about vanity metrics a lot and say things, especially things like followers or likes. Well, that doesn't really matter because it's just a vanity metric and it didn't really affect our goals. One person's vanity metric is another person's KPI, you know, it's all dependent on what you're actually trying to achieve. So I think it's important to remember that sometimes some of those metrics that get a little bit of a bad rep, I think, for being fluffy, actually can provide us meaningful data. Important to remember there's no silver bullet. There's no like one piece of data that's, if you have that go up month over month, then everything is great. Like nothing is a sign of perfection. There's no one thing to try to achieve. It's all just pieces of the puzzle, right? Like little bits of information that you can use to tell this story of the work you're doing and the work that you want to do in the future and to make informed decisions. So I like to think of data not as like a goal in itself, but as the like storytelling markers that help you figure out if you're getting toward your goal. So give me a baseline here. You can use the emoji reactions if you want, drop it in the chat, whatever is easiest for you. But what metrics, if you're measuring any right now, are you keeping an eye on at the moment? Or if you're not measuring any, let me know that too. Engagement. All right. I'm trying to scroll through everyone's little faces here because I've got my screen shared near all in one row. All right. Impressions, follower growth, engagement, completion. Okay. Engagement. Okay. Nice. Good starts. Okay. Well, no one put in what's a metric again that I saw, so that's always encouraging. I have gotten those before on a couple of occasions, so you guys are ahead of the game. All right, I guess I should ask too before this next part, do you feel like those metrics that you're keeping track of are giving you information that's helping you make decisions? Yes, no, chat, drop it in the chat. Thanks. Gotcha. Engagement helps us know what our audience prefers. Yes, very good. Yeah, and we want that, right? We want to know not just, oops, I gotta go back one, not just what the information is, we want to be able to use it. So that's part of the puzzle piece is you worked with Katie on SMART goals. What kind of information do I need to know to track my progress toward that goal? So pairing a bit with those SMART goals that you all made with Katie, I have the first of many gifts from my Easter Bunny days, as Josie said. I like that one. I call it the goal to metric matchmaking service. So this is a Google form that I put together. You should be able to access it all the time. The link is always going to be in your Teachery. So you can just put here sort of what feels closest to the goal you're trying to achieve. You can select it more than once if you want. Let's say visibility is your goal. Hit next. And then you'll get this feedback with all of my best advice about the metrics that you might want to consider using to measure your visibility. So you might want to look at impressions or reach, post frequency, engagement, number of followers you have, how many times your posts are being shared, website traffic, and things to consider, not hard and fast prescriptions, but just things to get you brainstorming. And then if you hit next, it takes you back to the beginning. So if you also want to, we'll say, encourage participation, you can look at it for a second goal and see engagement rate, comments, reactions, shares, sentiment, all things that are going to help you measure your audience's level of participation. So feel free to use this matchmaking service however is convenient for you. It's not going to go anywhere anytime soon, as long as Google keeps Google Forms up and running, and I think they plan to for a while. So that will always be there for you. I try to keep it updated depending on how platforms shift and things like that. So let me just get back on here. All right, so you know now what metrics you want to track. Once you've figured that out, it's a matter of actually tracking it and keeping an eye on all of that information in a way that is usable. And this looks different for everybody. So I think it's important to just find the system that works best for you. I'd be lying if I said that it doesn't get a little bit easier if you have a little bit of budget to put towards something like a Sprout Social, Hootsuite, something that can help aggregate that data a little bit better. But as with everything, I know Katie always says we do what we can with what we have. And same thing goes here. All of the platforms have native insights or analytics. They call them different things. It's insights on Instagram, analytics on Twitter, I think analytics on LinkedIn too. You can get all that information in the platform. It just depends on how you put it together. Sometimes it's a little bit more manual if you don't have those external third-party tools, but I do love a spreadsheet, you'll see. So that can always work. It's just a little bit of manual pulling. So the main thing to remember, once you've figured out what metrics you want to measure and you're trying to put together your data reports, no matter what you use or how you put it together, there are 3 things that have to be accomplished by it. I think in order for it to be effective, you have to identify your key performance indicators. You have to keep track of how those metrics change over time. And then you have to have somewhere where you're providing context for the data rather than just the hard number. So we'll go over what those all mean. Tracking data over time. You've got some options with this. And again, there's no right way to do it. It depends on what works for the kind of content you're posting, the kind of goals you have, your personal working style, the culture of your organization. You can track from week to week and do a little report to see if you perform better this week than last week. Same thing month to month, year over year. I think for higher ed is, especially once you get started and you've been doing this for a year or so, you've got a baseline built up. If you can compare this year to last year, most higher ed, I find that's the most helpful metric just because of the work that we do being so kind of cyclical, and usually end of August always has move-in stuff, right? So you're comparing August to July, it's going to look really, really different. But August 2021 is going to look the same as August 2022, or at least more comparable. Annual or semesterly, I have very recently switched to doing a quarterly report. I used to do it monthly, but then we kind of got a baseline established, and it just became obvious that month over month didn't provide us with as much actionable data as quarterly did. And then my VP and the board of trustees look at things quarterly. So it kind of lined up with the organizational culture of how everything is getting reviewed. So just think about things like that, whatever is useful to you. Some people do spreadsheets, some people like a line graph, some people get real fancy and like know how to do all of the fancy reports that like make pie charts and bar graphs and like Venn diagrams. I don't know. So you can get as fancy as you need to, whatever is helpful. And sometimes it's just a plain email. I know Jenny's talked about how she sends off like an email, I think once a week or something, that just says like, here are the high points. There's 3 things that happened this week. And that works well for her sometimes. So it doesn't have to be really in-depth, or it can be depending on your needs. I will say context matters. So I always make sure that in each of my reports, even if it's like an Excel sheet that's got calculations and percentages all over it, and it's mostly all numbers, I always put a box at the bottom where I can put in notes. And that's because I think the context for the data is so important, at least historically. So things like the pandemic was a prime example. Things, analytics, if you were doing social media or anything digital during the pandemic, you know that the data got weird for most people. Just because user behavior changed really, really drastically, and how people were interacting with digital services was really different. So at some point I can see in the future, maybe I will not immediately think, oh, that was a COVID time one of these days. And in 2024, maybe I'll do a report and say like, wow, why is our engagement so much lower than it was? And well, maybe it's lower because we had a ton of comments of people worried about how the campus was responding to COVID. And that was what the engagement rate spiked from. Or if you have a post that unexpectedly goes viral, whether that's for a positive reason or a negative reason, that might not be replicable month over month or at the same time next year. And so it's important to have that context, especially if you're reporting out, and we'll talk more about that after. But if I send my VP something that says my engagement rate is 20% lower this month than it was in the same month last year, he's going to ask me what happened. And so it's important to have that context to be able to say like, well, it went down 20%, but it's not because we did poorly this month. It's because we did exceptionally well and had an anomaly in the previous period. So everything happens and you think you're going to remember it. I never remember it. So do yourself a favor and write a note. And I think sentiment is something that is difficult to measure numerically speaking, but is so important. Especially, I know a lot of us are looking at engagement and engagement rate a lot. Engagement doesn't necessarily mean good interactions. We hope it does, but you can have a sky-high engagement rate on a post where everybody is complaining about some decision that the campus made and they're really unhappy and piling on. And it's actually kind of a PR nightmare, but their engagement rate is going to be really high. So important to be able to report that in context too, to one, know that when your engagement rate goes down, that's actually probably a positive thing in that circumstance. But also to be able, if there's an anomaly, that you can keep track of that. And you want to differentiate, right? Like you don't want to be comparing just engagement without considering whether or not that engagement was benefiting the brand or benefiting your goals. So that's all something that there's not a distinct number for, like in a chart to pull, but you kind of have to have the human eye applied to that. So leave yourself a note. It helps. And if that sounds like a lot to set up, you have a template here. So this is for a month over month. And like I said, I like to look at year over year, but that's usually only super helpful if you have already collected data for a full year. So since we're starting out here, a lot of us, this is a month to month, so you can at least get a sense of how you're performing for 30 days at a time. And then once you have 6 months or a year of this, you'll start to kind of get a sense of engagement and impressions are always going to spike in August when there's move-in. January is always going to be a really quiet time, but those during the semester months, like there's sort of a norm that you might start to feel out, which is helpful. And you'll get more of a sense of, for each platform, where the norm sits. So, because it's different. It's definitely, for us, our engagement rate on LinkedIn is always higher than our engagement rate on Instagram. If you post a ton of Instagram stories, your engagement rate is going to be a lot lower than your Facebook engagement rate. Doesn't mean your content's not good there. It's just kind of a nature of the product of the platform and the type of content and how users interact with it and the algorithms and all of that stuff. It's just different. So it's important to just get a baseline of what's normal for you and for your content. So you'll see there are tabs going across the bottom here, and this spreadsheet is all set up with the formulas. This is all fake data that I just put in this first one. So when, say, July is done, you filled out July, and then you go into August and populate things. This is all going to automatically calculate the percentage growth over the previous month. So if you change that, say, make it 18,000, why not? We did great. Then you had a 39% growth over last year. Good job. So feel free to use this. It saves you from having to put in some Excel formulas and stuff. I have gone through all the pain of messing that up and fixing it, hopefully, for you. It took a few drafts. But yeah, all of these calculations are in here. And if you need to kind of tweak things, you can. But again, you'll see here, there's a notes and analysis box. So I always write about sentiment, context, things that are happening, things that performed unusually well, big campus events, that kind of stuff I'll make a note of. And that's how you can keep track of that. And I would do it if you're just starting out. I would try month to month for the first year, and then you can look after that if it's helpful to switch to quarterly or annual. I would do more than annually, but quarterly for reporting or looking at year over year comparisons. Then once you've got all that information, that'll be a lot easier for you. Let me see if I can get back now. There, I've got to move my little Zoom box. I'm trying not to close out of the Zoom and also not close out of it. All right. So next steps, putting the data to work. This is the fun part. This is where we get to actually use the data. This is why we bother collecting it, is to actually work with it and use it to make decisions about your content moving forward. Oops, I am so sorry. There we go. Getting rid of some Zoom stuff. So once you've got some tracking, you've got a sense of what's going on, you can use these metrics to think through how to either optimize content to do what you want, or how they're impacting real life. The internet it's real. There are people here. Those like in-person on-campus goals. So I'll show you what you mean. Here's another template. This is my data-driven decision-making map. And it looks a little more complex than it is. I promise it's easy. I wouldn't give you anything too intense. So what I like to do sometimes, if I have a particular SMART goal, is to start with the day that we come up with that goal, entering it in here, put the date, put the goal. Here is a version of that. So if the Office of Student Life wants to post diversified, organic, and user-generated content and use strategies to communicate with their core audiences and engage community members, as a result, the page will increase organic engagement by 75% year over year. This engagement will be measured on social media by the following metrics: total number of engagements, total number of shares, engagement rate, and on the physical campus, engagement will be measured by event RSVPs, event attendance by students, faculty engagements in the form of event attendance, contact with the Office of Student Life team, or faculty content submissions to communications staff. And we'll review this biannually in June and finally in December when the goal will be due. So if that's your goal and you've all made a SMART goal at this point, just pull out the KPIs, your key performance indicators. So here, how do we know if we're moving the needle toward progress of this goal? It's written already in the SMART goal if you followed Katie's formula. So engagements, shares, engagement rate, average number of RSVPs per event, average event attendance, and faculty engagements. That's all something you can tie a number to. And if those metrics change over time, it's going to tell you something about how close you are to getting to your goal. Desired measurable outcome, again, pulling that right out of the SMART goal. 75% organic engagement increasing over the same time last year, and increasing in-person event attendance and faculty engagement. So just piece it out for yourself to look at, and then keep track of your actual outcomes so far. So if we are looking at last spring, right, we're measuring year over year. So we need to know what the benchmark is for the previous year. So last year we've got our numbers here for all of those KPIs. And we know so far this spring, we are already up 43% over last year. Good job, fictional OSL team. We're already up 16% of shares, up 71% for engagement rate, up 1%. So basically flat on the number of people RSVPing to events, up 1%. So basically flat for the number of people showing up at events, and down very slightly, mostly flat for the number of faculty engagements. So in this scenario, we then will look at potential areas of improvement. So how can we fix that? We're doing really well, making good progress on the digital stuff, the in-person stuff. How can we influence that digitally? So let's evaluate our digital content's relevance to our potential event attendees, since we're not getting the RSVPs we want. Is the messaging influencing students to attend the events? If we're looking at audience insight tools that show our social media audiences, our current students and parents, then how are we going to influence that faculty engagement piece, right? So maybe social media is not the way to do that. Or maybe if we're on Instagram and interacting with them and trying to get faculty on Instagram, it might not be reaching that audience if that's not where our faculty are. So look at if whether the messaging is even getting to the right audience there. So next steps, give yourself something to work for next time, and then give yourself a deadline to check back in so it doesn't just get kind of lost. Put it on your calendar. This is the day when I check in on this goal. So in this scenario, again, next steps, I say, well, I'm going to try linking directly to an RSVP submission form every time I post about an event on social media. And I can track that traffic using a bit.ly link or UTM, something like that. If I post about an event, I'm also going to include a CTA that says, tag a friend you want to bring with you, or share your favorite memory from last year's event, something that is calling for interaction. That's something I'm going to do more in my post. And then that faculty piece, since I don't think they're on my social media channels, I'm going to see if I can speak at the Faculty Senate meeting and talk to them about faculty engagement and why that's important. And we'll see if we can move the needle there. We'll check back in on September 30th. And then here is where I kind of want things to be moving, ideally by September 30th, to stay on track for my goal. So you've got that all worked out. And then, like reading a book, we move left to right and then move down the line. You can go here under the blue line and we start again. Same goal. Oops. Same goal, same KPIs, that didn't change. And then you can just pull in the goals that you had at the end of your previous session that you said you wanted to achieve by June. That can go here now. Your benchmarks, just change the dates for them and pull that information again, and then see where you are. And don't you know, all of our little next step shifts were just thriving. We did so much better. So yay, it was successful. Still want to see our RSVPs converting to attendance at a better rate. So we've got some next steps to help make that happen. And then we hold ourselves accountable and put our follow-up date and desired results again. So this is just a tool to help think through it and write it down in sort of a step-by-step way and turn those SMART goals into actual measurable data, and then next steps that are based on what we learned from that measurable data. So that's a template that's available to you as well. It's in the workbook in Teachery. So help yourself. And then sharing, this is the super fun part, right? We all have to just not keep the data to ourselves. People actually want to know about it usually. So how can we communicate that? Know your audience is the first thing. So this is almost like internal marketing in a lot of ways, right? Like this is you telling not the story only of your audiences and your institution, but of the work you're doing and why it matters. So to get that communication line as effective as possible, you have to think about who you're reporting to. And sometimes that's different. Sometimes you're truly making a report that's just for you, right? Like that's that nitty-gritty data. You're making the decisions, going through the decision-making map and your KPIs. But usually someone who is not like living and breathing your digital community, the analytics of it kind of every day, is going to find that pretty overwhelming. So it's a matter of figuring out what they do want to know. And that differs depending on whether you're sharing with a colleague who is just working in another department. People love that, by the way. If you can reach out and say, hey, I just wanted to let you know, we posted about that event that your office is hosting, and we got such a great response. Like that is a great way to build some collegial relationships, but also it gives them some meaningful feedback. This is something that we can see in advance there's a strong interest level for. So that's always helpful too. And then it gets different, of course, if you're communicating with your supervisor, senior leadership. People at a VP level and above are infamous for like not reading more than 1 or 2 pages, and they're not always immersed in the data in the way that we are. So I always like to include a glossary of any kind of jargony terms, sort of like we did at the beginning here. Like, you know, who's definitely not going to know the difference between impressions and reach? Your VP, unless they're a VP of marketing and they've been working in it for a while. So give them that reference point, share info that is relevant to them, and make sure you're looping in the necessary people. So if you're reporting about somebody else's work, an event that is related to something someone did or a service, copy them on the email. It's always a nice thing to do, I think, when you see high performing content. And then make sure you're customizing that presentation depending on who's receiving it. So here's an example from my life. So I may make this kind of a report for myself, and this is what I use to make that decision-making map, track things, establish benchmarks, establish baselines, compare one month to the other, year over year, keep track of context and sentiment. I cannot send this anywhere outside of my office though, because no one will ever open anything that I send them ever again. It's a little overwhelming. I'm extra nerdy. I know this about myself. I've accepted it. So I will, if I'm sending it up to my boss, who is a executive director of marketing, she knows how to read the data. She just might not have the time to read the data. So what I'll do is I'll give her the link to the full report, but I'll send her an email with bullet points, which she appreciates, I know. So I will give her the key takeaways, and then if she has questions about it, she can either come ask me, or if she wants to kind of look at the data herself, she has the option to, because the link is there, but I'm not like asking her time to dig through that info. I'm just telling her as a heads up what I want her to know. That's important. And then we have the VPs, the president, the board, and they get the special reports that are a little more visual. So what I have found with these, especially people who are in an area outside of marketing, who are working more at like that broad institutional level, they might not be familiar with jargon at all, like we said. They might not even be familiar with all the platforms. So it took me a while to adjust. Like when I say Instagram stories Q&A, they probably don't know what that is at all. So screenshots are really good. Pictures are really good. Even dialing it back, I always like to start with the primary goals, so they know, like, 'cause a lot of them do still think, I find that social media is, they know it's kind of an important thing and you have to be doing it, but it's sort of like that thing that the kids do while like the grownups are sending emails. So I like to present it as, we had goals, we measured the goals, and we either achieved them or didn't. So they know this isn't like a slapdash, like fly by the seat of your pants thing. Like we were actually trying to achieve something here, and here's how we did it, and really walk them through that. So these are screenshots from sort of random reports that I've done over the years, but they love the screenshots. They love to see the examples. If the report is going to the president and there was a post with a picture of a president at some point, that post is going in. So they're not above a little ego nudging. Think through all that. So you want to really show them what you're talking about. I think that's critically important. And then also show them at the highest level what the results were from that work. So for them, I mean, sometimes it's really just reach. They really just want to know that it got in front of people and it's working, especially if it was something like an awareness campaign about a new initiative or an event coming up. For this one, you'll see at the bottom, we did an Instagram stories Q&A about, this was back when COVID was happening. We said, students, ask us what your questions are about COVID, because it was very obvious. They were all confused at that time. This was back in 2020 when we were coming back. So that was important for them to know that we had 146 questions get sent in that we answered, like, and this is what they were concerned about. And we were able to share that information with them so they could see it kind of coming directly from the students rather than from us. So it's more about amplifying the students' voices in this case. And screenshotting is a great way to do that. So let's, oh my gosh, my mouse is going nuts. Sorry. I have made a little Jamboard here, so we can brainstorm reporting structures if that is helpful. So you can either tell me, like, shout out what to type and I'll type it in, or you can go to bit.ly/reportjam23 and that will bring you, if this loads, yes, to my little Jamboard. where we can think through how to do these reports for different people. So feel free to get in there if you want, or you can take yourself off mute and scream at me and I will add a sticky for you. But we're thinking through, we'll start with the first one. Who needs information about my digital community? Who might we want to send a report or some kind of information to? Oh, I see so many little animals popping up in the corner now. Anyone else just delighted by the Google anonymous chameleon, anonymous kiwi? Like, just brings me so much joy.
I can't make any edits. It says it's in view only.
No, please hold. All right, it's fixed. Your editor's now, I think. Sorry about that. This is brand new. You're in the pilot program of this Jamboard. Thank you so much for
It works. It works.
yay. Nice, some good ones here, y'all. Central marketing, that's a good one, especially if you're working in student affairs or a different division or department, social media. Central marketing is such a good relationship to foster, I think. And one that when I was in student affairs, worked on more, but I definitely, now that I'm in central marketing, I really wish more people would work with me, because sometimes I see things that like clearly people like were struggling to find a logo or a graphic or something and like ended up pulling something off Google. But I'm like, I just had that. I'd give it to you if you wanted. So yeah, make friends with your central marketing people. And they probably have a ton of templates and stuff already that you can borrow. And plus, everyone always wants to make it out like we fight with the department accounts and stuff. We're not fighting with anybody. We can all get along. Nice. Physical attendance at events. Care about engagement with posts. what students are saying about the institution. Yes, most of them care about that. Most of these people I have found care about that as well. The social listening, that's a big part too. I mean, take ownership over your expertise there as people who are like actually in the digital spaces that our students are in regularly. You have such a better grasp than you even know most of the time on sort of the pulse of what students are thinking and feeling and sharing on social. And I think finding ways to share that and share it up into different areas is like such a value add. And we forget about that sometimes. I'm also sorry if you hear my dog making weird noises in the background. He just chose to come lie on the rug and sigh heavily like he has a hard life. Yes, screenshot those comments. All right, it looks like the stickies are slowing down. This is great. Who needs information? VPs, directors in the division, Marcom, central marketing, our supervisors, external relations team, other departments. Yeah, and they all care about different things. And I mean, you can see the difference here. I'm sure some of the Marcom directors and central marketing are going to care more about engagement and collaboration opportunities. And some VPs, directors might just want to know what patients are saying, what students are saying about the institution. They might care about event attendance. And there's different things that you have data-wise that you can share that support all of those. So this is just a nice exercise to kind of use when you're planning your reports. And it's the marketing 101, right? This is how we build a marketing plan or a communications plan, is we start with like, what do I want them to know? And what do they actually care about knowing? And then how do you kind of package that in a way that it achieves both of those goals? So do the same thing internally for your work, right? It's as important in getting things done. So this is such a good little collection of stick, and it's so beautiful with all of the colors. This is just, Just gonna print this out and put it in a poster or something. Example screenshots. Oh, the media outlet, that's a good one. Cabinet members love media mention. Definitely share all of that with them. Big wins. Yes, celebrate your big wins, and don't just celebrate them with like the person at the desk next to you. Brag a little about yourself. You guys are doing good work. Love it. All right. Good job. And now I have to move all of my little Zoom things to get back to my tabs. Always. So we've talked about a ton here. Again, it's all in that teachery for reference for you. But we talked about picking metrics that align with your goals and matching those two up. You've got the Matchmaker tool for that if you need it. How to build a system that tracks your data in a way that feels manageable to you. I will say it's easy to get excited and be like, every week I'm going to set aside an hour and I'm going to do this. But like realistically, if you can't get to it every week, then just make it monthly. Like do what you can, right? I know, especially those of you working in student affairs, that social might not be your only job. So make it as manageable for you as you can. It's important to not just record the data. You want to use it to inform your strategy, right? Spreadsheets are great, but they're not great if you stick them in a drawer and then no one ever hears about it. Like they're working documents. And then make sure you're sharing that information with stakeholders. Tell people when things are going really well. And then if you have to have a conversation where you're like, hey, maybe this isn't going so well, have the data to back up why or to prove your point. It really helps to inform your conversations. And remember, it's about progress, not perfection. So there's no one right way to do analytics and tracking and reporting out. So, I mean, there's never going to be a perfect because there's no one perfect way to do it. But I think once you get started and at least start thinking about this stuff and keeping track of some aspects of it, and start working with it, you'll get a better sense as you go and be able to tweak it of like, oh, I don't have this information, but it'd be really useful if I did. And then you can start adding that in. So it's really just getting started, getting the ball rolling. Don't hold yourself to some like unattainable standard of like, well, I can't have these like gorgeous Sprout Social reports right now. Have the Instagram Insight report, you know, it's something, it helps you. So start where you are and do what you can. And as always, ask me questions. Ask me questions now, that'd be great. But if not, you can always find me on email, Twitter for now anyway, LinkedIn, Instagram, I'm on all the socials.
Awesome. Thank you, Danielle. Data Spirit Fingers in the chat. So we have got a good amount of time for questions. There was just a lot to unpack there. And obviously this wasn't a tutorial about where to go find the data and downloading and design and all those things, but there is space for those questions. But we wanted to kind of give you at least the starter pack of pulling on the daily to reporting it out, up the food chain. So with that, I'll turn over to y'all. What questions, what reactions? Unmute yourself, drop them in the chat, and let's get into it.
I could ask something. Okay. So I've seen a lot of people with their reports, they have like an engagement rates. Well, my problem is I'm trying to figure out, is the engagement rate by impressions, by reach, by your audience? Like I see so many different articles. I don't know what I'm looking, like which one I should use.
Yeah, I do. I mean, different platforms are going to pull it a little bit differently. So I would, wherever you're pulling the data from, just like look up. They usually have like a descriptor that says what calculation they're using for that. Or if you Google like, how does Instagram calculate it? There's usually someone that shows you. So just make sure it's consistent, I would say. I usually, for my purposes, which is not to say it's the right way to do it, but it's a way, so I'll talk about it. I usually do engagement rate as a ratio of engagements to the number of impressions. Because for me, what I want to know from engagement rate is, am I providing content that my audience finds relevant or valuable in some way, that they're interacting with it? So for me, I think getting that information works best if I'm looking at X number of times somebody saw this post and X number of times people interacted with it. And if I have 10,000 views on a post, but one person clicked like, then it probably like something, I know there's an issue there, right? Like the issue was not that no one saw it. The issue was that no one cared about it enough to do anything after that. If somebody saw a post 100 times and 20 people liked it, commented, shared or something, then I have a better sense of, okay, well, maybe my reach isn't exactly where I want, but I know that's a good piece of content that people like. And that for me, even algorithmically right now is useful, because right now the Instagram, Facebook, most of the algorithms, TikTok, same, I think, they're prioritizing posts that get more engagement on them. So even if you have a post that didn't get a ton of views, but people engaged with it, it's going to actually show it to more people, because it's going to find people who engage with that post and show it to people who are demographically similar to the people who liked or commented on it, which is super creepy and like dystopian, but that's what we do. So yeah, I'm always looking at it as a ratio of how many people saw it versus how many people interacted. But I mean, there are arguments if it's based on reach or whatever. I just find that even if I have to do a manual calculation, I can always get impressions from every platform, and I can always get engagement numbers from every platform, where I can't always get like reach or specific things.
Yeah,
That was all over the place.
you've answered it. It
Oh,
makes
good.
sense. So thank you so much.
Yeah.
I just want to say, I guess I'm really excited to kind of the template for the big picture goals, and then kind of tying it to those analytics. The way it's laid out is really helpful. I think it helps something click in my brain. So I'm really excited to kind of apply the goal that we worked on earlier in the cohort and start applying some of those KPIs, and actually find the time to start making some more intentional decisions because of that data. I feel like I track data, but I'm not really using it in the most effective way that I can. So I feel like that template will really help me kind of think through that.
Good. Glad. Yeah, I always, especially when I have a big campaign or something, I'll put on my calendar like the day where I have to check back in on it, because otherwise I will let it go and be like, well, it's doing pretty well. But yeah, holding yourself accountable to actually making a decision at a certain point, I think is helpful.
I know a number of you also quote unquote manage other departments or areas, or you're trying to coach and advise them that are also doing social media. And, you know, we don't want to feel like we're taking over or we're centralizing or anything, but this kind of data sometimes is helpful if you are needing to make decisions about continuing accounts, strengthening accounts, creating accounts, that it's just not the doing that is part of it. And so these tools could be applied for that as well. Just to get a sense, how many, you know, just like give me a hand raise, are you tracking just the actual data coming in, just like, you know, subscribers, likes, engagement, impressions?
Like in a
Share
spreadsheet.
numbers.
Or-
Yeah, just, you know, number dumping, basically, like just tracking. Okay, what about, is anyone tracking week over week, month over month?
I do month.
You do month over month? And quarterly, okay. And just like a content calendar, there's a million different ways you can design it. So the one that Danielle has created and shared is just a great template to build off of or take a look at and improve upon the ones that you've got. Tiffany, before my review, yeah, yearly.
Yeah.
And that sometimes we need a little like, okay, like make the bed to my guest bedroom when someone's staying there. Not until then. So sometimes we need some of those reasons. Or I think Danielle had a great suggestion, like you put a note in your calendar monthly that you've just got like a day-to-day and, you know, treat yourself afterwards as needed. So that maybe not a whole day, but yeah. And what about reporting up and out and around? What has come up around that? I know when we asked that before, not a lot of supervisors or ups are asking for it necessarily on a consistent basis. So I think it would just be interesting as we think about applying that material. My dog is losing her mind in the background. Our gardeners are here, so I went on mute. Okay, well, any other, what's on your mind? What can we clarify? Reactions?
I came in late and I don't know if there was a link to the template. And if there was, can you share it?
It is on Teachery. I can go back up through the chat. I know Zoom doesn't do this. It's so silly. I feel like you should be able to see the chat previously.
I'm trying to go back and find it too.
Awesome, thank you.
Oh, you got it. Thanks, Josie. Yes, that is my Excel calculations template. But again, I mean, it's not like the only way to do it. I actually honestly moved away from, I used that template for years and I don't use it so much anymore just because the type of reporting I'm doing shifted a little bit. But I still give it to people all the time and other people use it and find it really useful. So, and I still look back occasionally to see like, what did happen on that weird month where something happened? So having the notes is still important. yeah, and the reporting up piece, it helps you advocate for yourself too, which I encourage. I mean, I know I like, not really, but half joked about like, well, it really is easier if you have like a Sprout Social or Hootsuite or something. But I know especially when you're in like a division and this isn't like a full-time job, but it's kind of like social media is added on to someone, like it can be really, really hard to even get like $50 a month of budget for something. So I think if you take the initiative to have conversations and send reports to people higher up to say like, I'm connecting with 10,000 students a semester and managing conversations like at a 500 conversation volume every semester. Like I need to be able to like schedule and measure this and have some social listening tools. Like that's a way better argument than just going like, it'd be real nice if I had this. So I like reporting is your opportunity to advocate for yourself and tell the story of your work and why it matters. Because unfortunately, a lot of people still don't quite understand that this is like digital communities are real people and they matter and they're impactful for our campuses. So sometimes we have to go up to bat for ourselves with screenshots and spreadsheets.
Oh, the receipts.
Bring the
Anyways,
receipts.
possible. Yep.
Anything else I can answer, clarify, anything that when we meet on Thursday and have the chance to like get some hands-on practice that you want to work on? That's your time. I'm flexible. So, you know, we can shift everything around if we need to, whatever you want.
Okay, so for our gathering on Thursday, bring your data, whatever state it is in, and we are going to be getting to work. It is not going to be a statistics or math class, way more fun. And hopefully it could be something too that if you know you've got a monthly report due, a yearly report, whatever it is, that can be in the back of your mind as well. It can be just on one account. It could be just on one KPI or goal. But would love to get to work in our session Thursday.
Yeah, do your monthly, even if your fiscal year is done at the end of June, like do the annual report now and then just fill it in with the last couple of months of data. Save yourself some work. Your May self will thank you.
Okay, y'all, please join me in thanking Danielle. I appreciate her so very much. I many times will ask her to check my work, like literally sending her a spreadsheet. I'm like, I'm not missing something here. So she could also be a next great set of extra eyes and interpreter. It's not just the data, it's interpreting. It's like, what does this mean? Again, make those notes, help it make sense. Sometimes it doesn't make sense. Now Instagram isn't prioritizing reels, so like forget about it. Sometimes it's just not. It is what it is. Okay, amazing. We'll see y'all in Discord. We'll see y'all Thursday. Have a great night.